Testing, check, check, 1, 2. Alright, I'm not here to say I have all the answers, and again, if you have any recommendations for documentaries, books, to read up on the Bone Wars, or either of these guys, Marsh or Cope, let me know. But yeah, some of history, especially the 18th, or the 19th and 20th centuries, I mean, I'm sure most any centuries has some crazy stuff going on, right? Alright, this might be like 15, 20 minutes, just some thought-provoking things. This is not meant to be a source or definitive. I don't know all the facts. I haven't read all the sources, so if you have anything to add on it, definitely let me know. But I've heard enough to realize that some of the wildest stuff, especially in paleontology in the early American history, some of the stuff, you just read it, you're like, what the heck? How is this even possible? Right? Paleontology was pretty wild, I'm telling you. And if you already know, you know. You're like, oh yeah, Bone Wars, that was some pretty crazy times. And not because of the crazy dinosaurs they were finding, although that's part of it. You know, definitely started going out west and discovering a bunch of these extinct animals. And I was just thinking, right before starting, that it wasn't even established scientific fact that extinction was a thing until George Cuvier in 1813. He wrote essay on the theory of Earth that proposed now extinct species had been wiped out by periodic catastrophic flooding events. Okay, he was probably wrong there. They were definitely wrong. But you know, because before that you had some paleontologists, even Thomas Jefferson, he saw mammoth and mastodon bones. He's like, let's go out west and let's find some of those, some living ones. Right? Pretty crazy stuff the more you think about it. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. But you really think about it. So modern science was kind of still in its infancy. And again, it doesn't know everything to this day. It's a bunch of, you research, you study, you find out stuff, you find out what you can find out. But yeah, if ever a time in my life, as a pick-me-up, as a general, fun, thought-provoking thing, I feel like right now is the time to talk about one of the more, even though a lot of this is about what happened after his life, some odd stuff, but I feel like where do I even start to chew on this or start to describe Edward Drinker Cope? Alright, first break. And I mean, I had known about the Bone Wars through just in general, some history of life, studying fossil hunting, just knowing about general paleontology, but it wasn't until, back when I was in the golden age of information, right? We lost archive.org. It's still out there, but you just can't access, since like a year or two ago, these free books that are old and stuff anymore because, no more fun. That cuts into other people's profit margins. But back in the day, I read this book probably like 10 or so years ago off archive.org. It was Life of a Fossil Hunter by Sternberg, who had actually lived and fossil hunted with and for Edward Drinker Cope during those Bone War years. And let's be clear, like, Cope was a bona fide paleontologist, scientist, distinguished gentleman, right? He was not just, let's discover, and even though that's part of the agenda, to discover as many dinosaurs as you can, like, he was very methodical and really didn't just only care about dinosaurs. That was just the hot thing going on, right? I'm sure there was funding aspects of it. Okay, let's get into this. Okay, this straight from Wikipedia. Bone Wars. The Bone Wars, also known as the Great Dinosaur Rush, was a period of intense and ruthlessly competitive fossil hunting and discovery during the Gilded Age of American history, marked by a heated rivalry between Edward Drinker Cope of the Academy of Natural Sciences of Philadelphia and Othniel Charles Marsh of Peabody Museum of Natural History at Yale. Each of the two paleontologists used underhanded methods to try to outdo the other in the field, resorting to bribery, theft, and the destruction of bones. Actually, more than that, they would blow up the once they were done with a site, they would actually use dynamite and destroy the place in order for their rival, quote unquote rival, to not find anything there after they finished. Right? That's how petty it got. And I read even Joseph Leidy, or heard in a video or something. He was like, "Man, you guys are ruining this field. Like, it's not cool. This is childish." Anyways, and you do get some ethical stuff. Anyways, okay, then it concludes the paragraph with, each scientist also sought to ruin the rival's reputation and to cut off his funding using attacks in scientific publications. I don't know so much about that, but I could look into that and make another parter if I feel like it one day. But yeah, it all started because it seems so, you don't know how this affects people, right? And you're trying to find as many dinosaurs as you can. So it all started, let me see if I can find or the placement of the Elasmosaurus skull, some embarrassment. So Cope had found this plesiosaur, not technically a dinosaur, but close. Hold on, let me see if I can just control F it. Oh yeah, so at first they were friends, okay? So yeah, Marsh had accompanied him on one of their earlier excursions in like the late 1860s. It doesn't really get into it in the Wikipedia. Cope, kind of surprising. Oh, okay, so, alright, here we go. This is from the Bone Wars page. Cope and Marsh came from very different backgrounds. Cope was born into a wealthy and influential Quaker family based in Philadelphia. Although his father wanted his son to work as a farmer, Cope distinguished himself as a naturalist. So, and then Marsh persuaded his uncle to build the Peabody Museum of Natural History, placing Marsh as the head of the museum. Combined with the inheritance he received from Peabody until his death in 1869, Marsh was financially comfortable, although partly because of Peabody's stern views on his marriage, Marsh would remain a lifelong bachelor. I didn't know about that. Oh, here it is. The two began attacking each other in papers and publications, and their personal relations deteriorated. Marsh humiliated Cope by pointing out that his reconstruction of the plesiosaur Elasmosaurus was flawed, with the head placed where the tail should have been, or so he claimed 20 years later. It was Leidy who published the correction shortly afterwards. Cope, in turn, began collecting in what Marsh considered his private bone hunting turf in Kansas and Wyoming, further damaging their relationship. So yeah, there's definitely a spiral effect, or a domino effect, because Cope had originally placed his skull on the shorter end, whereas Marsh either guessed or knew that it was at the longer end, the longer vertebral end. So, but apparently Leidy published it. I don't think Leidy was on either side. Okay, let's get into the more juicy stuff. Well, that's already what am I talking about? That's already plenty juicy enough, right? Alright, and before I go on further, so I want to make sure I read the legacy on the Wikipedia, Edward Drinker Cope. Alright, so in his career, Cope published over 1,400 scientific papers. I mean, you have to think that probably cut in the quality of it, but still quite prolific. I mean, given somebody has to review and accept it, so even if some of them were probably half-arsed, I think they're still pretty good. His major works include 3 volumes on the origin of genera 1867, the vertebrata of the tertiary formations of the West 1884. Of course, tertiary is way after the dinosaurs, or kind of later, but still prehistory. And Essays in Evolution. He discovered a total of 56 new dinosaur species during the Bone Wars compared to Marsh's 80. And of course the Bone Wars, it wasn't like their whole careers. It was from 1877 to 1892. They had used their wealth and influence to finance their own expeditions and to hire fossil hunters. I was about to say bounty hunters. Kind of got bounties on fossils. By the end of the Bone Wars, both men had exhausted their funds in pursuit of paleontological supremacy. Is that a band name or what? Paleontological supremacy. Anyways, so I mean, it sounds like they're just petty. They're just hiring people, but I mean, they still described a lot of species that still hold up to this day. Like, they're definitely out in the field doing the work, right? All right. So yeah, so Cope had discovered 56 new dinosaur species compared to Marsh's 80. Although Cope is known today as a herpetologist and paleontologist, his contributions extended ichthyology, in which he cataloged 300 species of fishes and described over 300 species of reptiles over 3 decades. I mean, he was prolific, to say the least. I mean, these are just numbers on a page, but really think about it. How many per year, and then just year after year after year. Anyways, in total, he discovered and described over 1,000 species of fossil vertebrates and published 600 separate titles. One Caribbean snake, he named it in honor of his daughter. His proposal for the origin of mammalian molars is notable among his theoretical contributions. I mean, he was a genius, right? Not just because he was a visionary, and reading Sternberg's Life of a Fossil Hunter biography. I mean, he talked of Cope as a genius. I'm sure the book that Osborne wrote, he also talks very favorably of him, even probably more from what I've heard, which kind of excuse me, put me off to reading it because I hear it's like extremely biased. But if anyone has any reviews, or just say if if it's a must read, I definitely would be interested. Shoot, I was about to look up something. Oh yeah, so he died when he was 56. In the grand scheme of things, that's, I mean, for back then it's probably fairly long, but nowadays, like, only 56, and you put out 1,400 papers. I mean, that is incredible. Even though I think he started fairly young. Yeah, because I remember in Sternberg's, he was saying, like, by the time he was like 5, 6, or 7, he was writing essays like adult level. Like, very few people, I think, are able to accomplish that. Yeah. And I was reading here recently that it said when he died, he it's in his biography. Let me see that real quick. He has a whole paper, a whole section on his personality. I gotta read that, I guess. Oh man. Yeah, so death. Yeah, I was impressed. I forgot this, that apparently he was given, at least allegedly, he was still given talks at his bedside while he was really sick. Yeah, of course it's famous, I mean, that when he died, he had challenged Marsh, who, I'm pretty sure Marsh died first. No, it was actually a couple years after, but, he wanted to, they used to think that intelligence was measured by brain, size, so he challenged Marsh, hey, I bet my brain is bigger than yours. I don't know if it's because he lost the Bone Wars to him, or he just wanted to know in general, is my brain bigger than yours? It's just real petty stuff. But you gotta think, if you're always trying to get one up on your rival who's in the same field, like, I guess, I don't know, back in the day, I kind of understand, I guess. I don't know, seems still really petty, but apparently I'm just learning now. You'd think I would have read this Wikipedia article. It just keeps on giving. Um, so apparently, Cope had a pet tortoise and Gila monster, which I guess that makes sense. You go out west, you find this really nice looking lizard. They must have known it was venomous. Apparently didn't get bit by them, or maybe one of his men did. I don't know. So yeah, Osborne visited Cope on April 5th, inquiring about Cope's health, but the sick paleontologist pressed his friend for his views on the origin of mammals. How's your health? I don't know. It's not so good. What is the origin of mammals, right? Word of Cope's illness spread, and he was visited by friends and colleagues. Even in a feverish condition, Cope delivered lectures from his bed. Cope died on April 12th, 1897, 16 weeks short of his 57th birthday. Of course, they had to say that. Okay, let's just read the part of his personality. Oh, so yeah, maybe this is more open-ended, but I was going to talk about. It's just kind of depressing, and it's just whatever, and it's not like it was who he was. I mean, it makes sense given who he was, his impact. I was going to talk about this blog post about his skull was on loan, and people would post pictures and go, "Hey, I'm spending Christmas with Cope," like have his skull and dress him up, and there was like two different hands. I think the more famous one was in the 1990s around the original Jurassic Park craze phase. It was Fizzy, yeah, something starts with a P, not some European last name. I think he made some movies. And I'll put the link below in the description for anyone that wants to read it. But yeah, there were some travelers, who would take Cope's skull and have some good times. I guess I'd be more nervous than anything not to lose the skull, I guess. And then one of the universities was like, "Hey, what the heck are you doing with his skull? Like, give it back." And then I think it was Robert Bacher who decided, okay, this is going to be a type specimen for humanity, right? Somebody who's biased about dinosaurs, of course, would do that. Yeah, we know a lot now. Like, brain size does not mean smarter, right? You want more complexity and more neural stuff. Like, crows are extremely smart. It's not because they have the biggest brain, but the complexity and the number of neurons, I think, has more to do with it. But alright, let's talk about. Alright, I don't think I've ever read this section, so this should be fun. Alright, personality of Edward Drinker Cope. Here we go. Julia assisted Osborne in writing a biography of her father, titled Cope, Master Naturalist. She would not comment on the name of the woman with whom her father had had an affair prior to his first European travel. Julia believed to have burned any of the scandalous letters and journals Cope had kept, but many of his friends were able to give their recollections of the scandalous nature of some of Cope's unpublished routines. Charles R. Knight, a former friend, or toward the end of his life, he was an artist, called Cope's mouth of the filthiest from hearsay that in Cope's heyday no woman was safe within 5 miles of him. Wow. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but I'm not saying that people back then were more testosterone. They were also more bored, and probably more in the, oh yeah, I just need more women, that'll fix everything, right? I mean, it was simpler times. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but I'm telling you, man, these people, they used to be filthier or something. I don't know. As Julia was the major financier behind the Master Naturalist, she wanted to keep her father's name in good standing and refused to comment on any misdeeds her father might have committed. I mean, nowadays you'd probably brag about, I don't know, some characters. Okay. Cope, I mean, back then it was, oh, how scandalous. Like, you have 1 or 2 affairs, like, how scandalous. But nowadays, like, oh, yeah, okay, whatever. I mean, it still hurts, but Cope was described by zoologist Henry Weed Fowler as a man of medium height and build, but always impressive with his great energy and activity. I keep hearing that over and over and over, so there must be truth in it. To him, Fowler wrote, Cope was both genial and always interesting, easily approachable, and both kindly and helpful. I mean, sometimes they say that, they put people on pedestals. You don't know how actually kind and helpful they were. His self-taught nature, however, meant he was largely hostile to bureaucracy and politics, of course. he had a famous temper. One friend called Cope a militant paleontologist. Militant paleontologist. If that's not intense, I don't know what is. Despite his faults, he was generally well liked by his contemporaries. American paleontologist Alfred Romer wrote that Cope's little slips from virtue were those we might make ourselves were we bolder. Were we bolder. Yeah. Cope was raised a Quaker. He was taught that the Bible was literal truth, although he never confronted his family about their religious views. Osborne writes that Cope was at least aware of the conflict between his scientific career and religion. Okay. Yeah. I think that's the end of the very interesting parts. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that Marsh was a boring, right, plain, but we just don't know much. At least I don't know as much about him. He's not as prolific. Doesn't seem as much the character. Yeah, so just talking about some of the species they described. So Stegosaurus, Apatosaurus, Allosaurus was described by Marsh. And I think Cope had, yeah, definitely Dimetrodon. I keep reading Dryptosaurus. I'm not sure what that is. Let me see real quick. I mean, it's not just dinosaurs like I said earlier. Oh, Dryptosaurus, okay, was in Appalachia Island. Tyrannosauridae. Even though Tyrannosaurus Rex wasn't described until well after the Bone Wars, or found and described. Oh, this says Marsh. What? Hold on. This also says it was described by Cope as Megalosaurus. But it seemed like... It said it was described as Dryptosaurus later by Marsh, so I guess he won out somehow. And I mean, I remember especially reading that Sternberg biography, talking about working with Marsh. You know, going out in the West back in the 19th century, there were no highways, not reliable transport. Like, it was a journey. It'd take months and months and months, and you're putting your life and limb on the line, you know, making these excursions. It wasn't just a quick out and back, you know, airplane or highways travel. Like, oh yeah, I'm going out west for a week. No, it take months and months. And there were Indians out there still. Like, your safety was not guaranteed. And I remember reading about that. Like, Cope is a bad man. I mean, you don't know their intentions. And I heard, like, oh yeah, you'd hear reports of, oh yeah, just the other day the Indians were here. And, you know, I'm not going to get into, or Native Americans, whatever you want to call them. I think I've heard that. Yeah, I don't know what they're like being called, preferred, but yeah. So it was a wild time, and you know, disease and just nothing was guaranteed, and they still were that much into science and discovery that they still went out west multiple times, or at least hired people later on to do their dirty work and discover these things. Because I'm sure that there was a lot of excitement, like, what are we going to find next? Like, right? And there's still that, even though there's more people getting funding and going to other nations, you know, other time periods and places. And yeah, but especially back in the day, it's like, man, you want the biggest, baddest, most interesting dinosaurs in life. Even if, you know, Cope wasn't just only about dinosaurs, he was about discovering the whole. I gotta be honest, you know, reading that Sternberg biography, hearing about Cope having dreams about these wild animals, you know, I kind of feel jealous. Like, whenever I have dreams, it's about real life, not about past life. I know that's an impossibility in my lifetime. So, but again, he probably felt things deeper. Oh, I don't know for sure, but I mean, you gotta think he probably was. I mean, he had genius in him. He had a temper. He probably maybe was autistic, but still made a living somehow out of following his dream. So more kudos to him, I suppose. So yeah, you guys have any thoughts? You definitely learned something, let me know. I could talk on for 5 more minutes. Am I going to say anything interesting? I don't know. Let me read more of this since I'm already here, see if I find anything more interesting. here's something I either didn't know or didn't really realize. Okay. So, during the Bone Wars, Cope had lost so much money in his silver mines that he had to sell sell a lot of his fossil collection in 1886. However, in the 1890s, he was no longer poor, but died when he was 57 in 1897. So yeah, there's some tough times. Definitely lost a lot of money. And of course, you had Cope's rule, which I guess people used to believe. They would notice, some animals evolve over time to become larger. And apparently he was the first one to show that horses evolved to be larger as they moved from woodland onto grassland. Yeah, I mean, again, they used to think evolution had an end goal, but even though nowadays in recent decades, we more so know that paleontologists know that animals are just adapting what works best in their current environment. They're just not trying to reach an end goal. But you're finding these things. Oh yeah, they got larger over time. Obviously, they're making progress, right? But I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. I just know I'm going to find something super interesting. But again, I say that I can always make another part. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do not mean to put Cope on a pedestal. I'm not saying he's like the prime. He was a product of his time, and misconceptions. There's some racist stuff. But I'm not trying to defend that. And even here, is saying he was kind of a, I'm not trying to knock on Lamarck. He was a genius in his own right on certain stuff. He was one of the early ones to really, he was a plant botanist. He was around 50, which back then was pretty old. And he decided instead of retiring, he would go from studying plants to studying invertebrates, and described a bunch of invertebrate diversity. It made, I think, the modern orders of invertebrates, actually. So, it might not be your favorite. It's definitely not my favorite, but you have to, respect for at least noticing those things. Even though Lamarck, his views of evolution are quite skewed compared to, descendants through genetic stuff and change through genetic stuff. They used to think, including Cope, apparently, just use and keep struggling and improving through use, that something will eventually become better. And better nowadays that it's mostly genetic. Epigenetics kind of that's something else. Genetic change during a individual's life can impact future genetics, but there's some wild stuff in history. We all just think, history is boring. It's just, they discovered this, they cross their T's and dot their I's. But there's some wild stuff in history. I'm telling you, Bone Wars is definitely one of those. So again, if anyone has any books, recommendations, documentaries that present these things in an interesting way, I'm definitely all ears. I think 30 minutes is long enough. But yeah, they discovered a bunch of dinosaurs in extinct life. And then Cope even said, I read Charles Darwin, on his came to be a big work about evolution. He said it has too much geology in it, and yeah. So at least he didn't want to admit that it was onto something great. But I think back in the day they kind of knew about evolution, just nobody had actually proven it. Reproduction, and over time species can change into something else. I'm not going to open too much, but it is a proven fact. Through island stuff, new species come about that are better adapted to certain things. They thrive and survive and pass on their traits. They didn't know about all the genetics back then. But anyways, I'm getting in the weeds. Boring stuff here. Any science major can talk at length about. So yeah, if you guys want anything more I could read from Wikipedia that I might be interested in, I guess for Chronicles of Catfish I could. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna make it boring. I like visual stuff. I think other people do too. Not just me reading off facts and dependent on something I am pretty passionate about diversity, but alright, that's all I have to say about that. Alright, goodbye. Till next time.